Hey everybody, it's Melissa. Welcome to another Living a Creative Life video hangout. I've got a really awesome special guest today, but before we get to her, I'm going to do my little routine, what is it? It's a ritual. It's a ritual of playing my ukulele for you before we get started with the conversation. And I was trying to decide what song to sing for you. I wish that I had an original song about food or body image, and probably at some point I will, but I don't at the moment. It's a big gap in my song catalog. So instead, I'm going to play you the title track to my CD, Online Dating Blues, which is a little hard to see because it's covered in plastic, so it's shiny. So this is online dating. I did a lot of online dating back in the day. The day being 2006 to 2009. I dated 57 first dates in a 2.5-year period. Well, late one night, you're all alone at your machine. Suddenly a website appears on your screen. It's a dating site, you know the kind. You think, what have I got to lose? Well, $34.99 a month, it turns out. That's how it starts. You got the online dating blues, yeah. So you type in your credit card to start shopping for men. You check off what you're looking for. Handsome, rich, and thin. Only 3 guys pop up. And honestly, if you had to choose, maybe being single isn't so bad after all. That's how it goes. You've got online dating blues, yeah. Here we go. You check your mailbox in the morning. You snap late at night. You know you should be working, but instead you're on the site, reading profiles and checking email every hour for any news on the hour and a half hour too. That's how it goes. You've got the online dating blues. Well, now you've browsed 3 dozen profiles, and you're starting to wonder why all of the men your age want someone 15 years younger. It's enough to make a girl just want to give up and go out shopping for shoes. Time for a little retail therapy. That's when you know you've got the online dating blues. Trumpet solo. Well, you decide to take a gamble, so you email 7 guys, but your ego takes a beating when not one of them replies. Oh, it's like playing the slots in Vegas. Most of the time you lose, but you keep trying for the jackpot. That's how it goes. You've got the online dating blues. Now you're deep in correspondence, the best you've had in years. You start to get your hopes up, and the guy just disappears. He won't return your emails, your phone calls. It's like he handed you a Rubik's Cube. Now you're obsessing, driving yourself crazy trying to figure it out. That's how it goes. You've got the online dating blues. Here we go. You check your mailbox in the morning. You snap late at night. You know you should be working, but instead you're on the site, reading profiles and checking email every hour for any news. Oh, hell, you know you're checking it every 5 minutes. That's how it goes. You got the online dating. One more verse. Well, now you finally get a date, but when he walks in the door, you realize his pictures are from 20 pounds ago. Oh, when he wasn't a string bean then. I guess it's just called paying your dues. This kind of thing happens to everyone online eventually. That's how it goes. You've got the online dating. That's how it goes. You've got the online dating. That's how it goes. You've got the online dating. Online dating. Blues. Thank you. All right, I'm going to unmute.
Yay! Made me want to dance.
Awesome! Especially since dancing is my first creative passion, so anything that makes someone want to dance makes me happy. Hey, Beth, thanks for joining us on video. Yay!
Guys.
Well, I want to get started with our conversation. I am so excited to have Sue Ann here, Sue Ann Gleason, who I met originally not that long ago in Playing Big, a course that we took together that, Beth, you were in as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So we were participants in this amazing 6-month course, and I just felt this instant connection with Sue Ann, which is not a big surprise, given the parallel in our history. So let me tell you a little bit about Sue Ann. Hey, Deirdre, another Playing Big.
Hey.
Graduate. I love, Sue Ann, what you write about yourself. Sue Ann writes that she inspires women to trust their intuition, unravel their food stories, in other words, their life stories, and take back their plates one luscious bite at a time. Doesn't that sound awesome? So I am especially excited to have Sue Ann here because as I look back on my journey toward building and creating and living a fully creative life, I am becoming more and more aware all the time of how the unfurling of my creativity has been so inextricably intertwined and interlinked with the unraveling of my body image issues and my eating issues. It's really a key piece. So, Sue Ann, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. And I have to tell you a funny story that goes with your song. I actually met my husband before online dating became popular, but I met him in a Personal Plus ad in the Washington Post. And so, that song made me laugh because it reminded me of the story. So at that time we had the newspaper, right? It wasn't, the online pictures. And he wrote in his ad, partial vegetarian, liked walks on the C&O Canal, and what was the other thing? Oh, loved theater. So we've been married 12 years now. We've taken 4 walks on the C&O Canal. We've been to the theater maybe 4 times, and he eats sausage and bacon. But anyway, I love him to death, and he would die if he knew I was telling that story online.
That's hilarious. Well, when we won't get into the real dating. This is not going to be centered on dating. Don't worry, you guys. But I went on some classified ad dates when I was getting started after my divorce, getting back onto the dating scene because the internet was just barely picking up and people were very squeamish about it, So I did some of those classified dates too. Anyway, I want to start, Sue Ann, by talking about your story. those of us who were in Playing Big really got a great connection around how powerful stories are and how important our own stories are for playing big in the world, right? For sharing our important messages that we have to share and bringing our value into the world. Because stories are really how we connect, and it's how we learn most effectively is through stories. And your story, Sue Ann, is so inspiring. So I want to ask you first to tell me about a little bit more about what you do as a food-based healer and how you got here.
Well, I was a teacher for 30 years, so this is my second career. About maybe 3 or 4 years before I was of retirement age, I got sick. I think I was in complete adrenal failure. I was diagnosed with osteoporosis, and I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroid disorder. And I remember thinking at the time, how can someone as healthy as me exercise, not taught aerobics for, I don't know, at that point it must have been like 23 years. Like, how can I end up with crumbling bones? And who is Hashimoto? And what is he doing in my body? And of course, both doctors wanted to prescribe for me a pharmaceutical, that would be a lifelong drug. And I didn't even take Advil at the time. So I began my own study. I just began a tenacious study of cellular rejuvenation, and my vehicle at that time was through raw food nutrition. And so I became convinced that I healed because of the work that I did nutritionally. And then I decided that, of course, I had to tell the whole world about that, because that's what we do when we're successful at something, is we want to share it, right? So I went back to school to study nutrition, and then I went back to school again to study culinary arts. And I combined those two skill sets and became a culinary nutritionist. But now I call myself a nourishment counselor. But it wasn't very long into this new path that I discovered that I still had a lot of my own food story to unravel. And I discovered that sitting across from a client one day, and she was in the raw food community, and she had called me to say that she needed my help. And I said, what's up with you? And she said that she was binging. And so she came in, and that was the time when I was actually seeing clients face to face. Now I see 99% of my clients online. But she was sitting across from me, and she's sitting on this couch, this little wisp of a woman, I mean tiny. And she was obviously very distraught and very contracted and very tiny. And I said to her, what are you binging on? And she said, salmon and sweet potatoes. And I was expecting to hear like hot fudge sundaes and peanut butter with a spoon at midnight. And when she said salmon and sweet potatoes, it just gave me pause. And I said, okay. And in my mind, I'm thinking, like, how do you binge on sweet potatoes? Because the last time I'd made a sweet potato, it took at least 45 minutes to bake that. And I was just trying to really wrap my brain around the idea of a binge on two foods that, even though I was, a high raw advocate, I did not feel were bad foods at all. In fact, salmon is a really healthy food as long as it's not farm raised. So what came out of this conversation was that she was trying to adhere to a very, very rigid raw vegan diet, low-fat raw vegan diet, and her body was clearly calling for something different. And so my question to her was, can you go there? Can you honor your body and check it out? Can you give yourself permission to eat a piece of salmon and not call it a binge? Can you give yourself permission to eat a sweet potato that's baked and not call it a binge? And it turned out that she was really worried, frightened that if she allowed herself those indulgences, she would die of cancer. And when we unraveled that story a little bit more, it turned out that her mother had died of cancer, and she was convinced that she was on the same path. And she wasn't willing That was my one unsuccess story. She wasn't willing to go there. She wasn't willing to let go of the rules that she had in her head around nourishment. And at that time, I was back in school once again, only this time I was studying the psychology of eating out in Colorado. And I came face to face with my own food rules. Because when I looked at her across from me, I realized that much of my story around food was still very rigid. Not that rigid, but still very rigid, even though at that time I wasn't following the 100% raw food diet. I was still had a lot of food rules. And one of my colleagues challenged me on that when I shared this story. And so I did a complete, rehaul of my own food story, and really started examining what I had been doing in school and in my work. And that was like providing legitimacy to my own food rules. Like, I'm going to teach this now, right? I'm going to convince you that it's the right way because it was the right way for me. And so my work since that point has shifted into nourishment and really unraveling the food story, so that when we are choosing the foods that nourish us, they truly nourish us at every level. And it's not just because in our heads we believe that certain foods are bad, or we believe the latest guru or the latest diet or nutritional system that is popular, in the sign of the times. So that's kind of the story of how I got from there to here. And the chocolate story is a whole nother chapter, so maybe we'll save that for the end, right?
Well, that's so interesting to me, especially since my own relationship with food and my body and body image and everything was so tied up in rules. And when I was very viciously bulimic for, I'd have to go back and count 8 or 10 years or something, and on and off, there were worse times and not so bad times, and what ultimately helped me heal from that was a combination of many things. One was meeting a man, like falling in love for this time, and having a man tell me that he thought I was beautiful just the way I was. And I wasn't dancing. I had been a dancer, and there's nothing that will exacerbate or create body image issues like being in the dance world and standing in front of a mirror in a leotard for 8 hours a day. and having a model of that's so beyond like the norm in terms of skinniness, right? The dance world tends to be like much skinnier. Like the ideal is much skinnier than the general public. And studying feminist theory and understanding how the personal is political, and that all of the energy that I was spending to why was I believing what these magazines were telling me that I was supposed to look like? Why did I get into that? I started questioning that, and I stopped the rules. So I had been I grew up in a family where they had a very strange, looking back, very strange relationship with food, sort of philosophy or attitude about food. There was no real scarcity in my house at all. Middle-class family, we always had enough food. But there was this sense of, if the brownies get eaten, there's not going to be any more brownies. So you better grab that brownie now. And the guy that I was dating, who is now my ex-husband, his family had a totally opposite relationship with food. His mother was constantly cooking and baking, and they had boxes of See's candy that had gone stale because there was so much around that people never had to worry about scarcity. There was never a sense of you better have that last piece of See's candy or you're not going to get any again, which was how it was in my house. And for me, I had to just stop saying I can't eat X, Y, and Z and allow myself to eat anything. And although I don't know that I was coming at it from a place of nourishment consciously, I think that's really what was going on. What is going to nourish me in this moment, rather than, oh my God, is this going to add 2 ounces to my inner thighs or whatever?
Yeah, you've told me that story, and each time you tell it, I'm just struck by the scarcity abundance conversation, because for me, all of those years, and what I haven't told you about my own history is I was a fitness instructor at the time I was teaching and an exercise nut. You know, I really believed in my life that my mother was overweight as long as I can remember, and she was also on the perpetual diet. And so I grew up in this food paradox where I grew up in an Italian household, family of food, grandmother made homemade bread, homemade pasta, apple pie, lemon cake, you know, homemade sauce, canned your own tomatoes, beautiful food environment with a mother who was always on a diet. And she was on a diet not just with one but two organizations. So she had Diet Workshop and as backup reinforcement Weight Watchers. So here I was, you know, like in this place of, you know, we eat but then we repent, and then we give ourselves permission to eat and then we repent, because we're destined, in my mind, we're destined to look like that, you know, that biologically I was destined to become my mother, and so I had to be very careful. And if I got a little pouch, right, or if I gained weight, then I was really convinced, and I would get back into that cycle of over-exercising to give myself permission to eat, or starving myself, all kinds of crazy diets that were not healthy. And so it's no surprise to me now that my bones were in trouble, because really when I look at women who come to me now and they want that, just 5 more pounds, I just need to lose 5 more pounds, or, you know, I was so much happier at 112 or 110, and when I say to them, well, when did you last weigh 110 or 112, it's they were in high school, you know, or college, or they were a dancer, right? And what I've learned about estrogen and what I've learned about the whole hormonal cascade that occurs as we age is sometimes we need those pounds of protection. So how do we change the mindset from nourishment, you know, or actually from looking good to being healthy? And it's a struggle for women. It's a real struggle. So back to abundance and scarcity, if we're coming from this model of scarcity rather than abundance, I think we get called into that weight loss war zone.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. And my mother, I mean, still to this day, she's always trying to lose the last 5 pounds. My mother is slender. She's always been slender. My friends always tell me how pretty my mom is. And she's in her 70s now, and she's still always trying to lose that last 5 pounds. So, you know, we grow up in this stuff. But what's striking to me most now is looking back, I've been thinking so much about all of those years and all of those, you know, hours and days and weeks and months that I spent obsessing over changing my body in some way. Basically, which boiled down to, although I didn't think of it this way then, it boiled down to a kind of self-hatred. And all of that energy, I'm mourning it now, that what I might have created with that energy and that time and that focus, if I had applied it towards a legacy project, something creative, some art. And also, which brings me to one of the things that I really love about what you do is you really approach food as art. And that's something that was not part of my upbringing really at all. You know, there's a little bit of presentation here and there. My mom tried to make things, she's not a foodie. She tried to make foods that we would like and stuff. But this notion of food as art you do that so beautifully. And so many of us think of food as an enemy, right? But when you approach it, it's more, you think of it as an ally and as art. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I will, and I also see a question coming in from Emily Rose, and I just want you to know, Emily, that I will speak to that. Yeah, so the food is art piece, and you talked about it, when you talk about the attention, okay? So for me, and that's why the name of my business is Conscious Bites Nutrition, because I think that we've been largely unconscious about the plate. If we're in our heads and we're thinking about what we should eat or shouldn't eat, and we spend all that energy in that place, then we never really appreciate the sensual nature of food. And so there's a little science here too. It's called the cephalic phase digestive response. And what that means is when we pay attention to the taste, the pleasure, the aroma, the visual impact of a meal, actually increases our metabolic power. And it helps us digest food, assimilate food in a way that we don't, right, when we're eating on the run or not eating on the run, which is what many women do. They starve themselves all day, save it up for save up their calories for dinner. So by paying attention to the visual impact of a meal, we're doing two things. We're taking our body into a more relaxed state, into more of a parasympathetic response, which is also a great place to be for digestion and assimilation. And for the first time, for many of us, we're paying attention to the meal. And I find in my practice and in my world that when I spend time arranging the food on a plate, I'm actually eating food, I'm eating less food. It's like becomes more of a conscious, what am I satisfied with, as opposed to an unconscious just eating or filling a void. So, and I also think it's a beautiful way to approach food. It's like, whoa, what if we take a picture of what we're eating? Could that be a piece of art? So I think that what brings people into my work are the luscious photographs that I take and splash all over social media or over my website or newsletters. And it's like for people that aren't eating that way or don't view that food that way, it's new. It's something new. It's a different way of looking at nourishment.
Yeah, I just think about like I cook a lot with my boyfriend. We cook together, and we'll make these very simple but really delicious meals, and how much more pleasurable and nourishing that is for my entire being to sit down at the table with my boyfriend with, like last night we had this whole grain pasta with this amazing yummy vegetable stuff that I made to put on top, and it looked so pretty, and we're sitting there together, and that is so much more pleasurable than just like, okay, open the refrigerator, whatever's there, shove it in which is, okay, I admit it. I do eat like that sometimes.
We all do. We do. And that's okay. It's for me, it's like I don't expect people to make these amazing dinners every night and eat by candlelight every night. I'd like that. But first of all, it can be really simple, but also I think we honor the fact that there are times that we are busy, especially if we're creatives, right? Like when I'm in a project or if I'm in my creative muse, I don't want to take time to eat. I even forget about food, which is another story that we want to talk about, right? Because truly, when we're not obsessed with food or counting calories or tracking grams and all that good stuff that we do when we're dieting, think about the energy that is cleared for our creative pursuits. But what I've noticed with women, and what I hope to bring to light, in the coming months when I engage in my next program, is that what I've seen is when they start to get into their creative lives and they give themselves permission to spend an hour a day writing or paper art or painting or whatever it is they would always wanted to do but never give themselves permission to do, the distraction, the food distraction is no longer there. I think there's a relationship between being satisfied in our creative world or enticed by our creative world that takes us away from the obsession around food. And I'm deeply interested in this connection.
I definitely see that in my own life. The place where for me it got particularly tricky is my first big creative expression was dance. And dance has such a complex relationship with food, of course, and body, because it is your body, and your body's on display. So that added a very complicated, interesting layer. But I think back to my life when I had to stop dancing because I got injured, and it took me many years to realize that I was a creative person and to finally start creating. I really didn't know that I was a creative person for, oh my goodness, almost a decade. I was in academia, and academia is not a creative place to be. And I remember that time of in my life, which was some of the worst times of my eating disorder were during that period. And it was also a time where I did not feel a sense of purpose or identity, because I didn't know that my purpose is I'm a creator, and I wasn't feeding that part of myself because I didn't know about it. And what I would do is obsess over food and also over other things. Like I had an obsession randomly of antiques. I wanted to find an antique stained glass window, which I didn't have the money to buy, but I just like spent weeks and weeks shopping in antique stores. Like, hello. And I realized that for me, my personality is I have to have something to dive into. And if I don't have something productive to dive into, I will dive into something unproductive. So thankfully, I have discovered productive things to dive into that is a lot healthier for me and a lot better for the rest of the world, too, than somebody shopping for antique stained glass windows or whatever. Let's see. So Emily writes in the chat, she writes, this is fascinating. I've been changing my diet, and it's incredible how much better I'm doing in my mind and my body. My mom projects her insecurities about her weight, and since she got a gastric bypass, it got worse, since she weighed less than me now. And I wonder why she treats me like that. Any ideas? Emily, you guys might hear, sorry, the gardener is here, and so you might hear loud noises because I have a very sensitive microphone, so I apologize for that. Emily, if you want to, if you have a microphone and can turn that on, I'd be really curious to hear more about, to have you, flesh out a little bit more, as it were, what you wrote in the chat. You can click on the microphone icon, anybody who wants to share your audio, up at the top, the little green icon that looks like a microphone, and then you have to click on there's a white box, you have to click on approve to allow your sound to be picked up, and then click on share my microphone, and make sure you can talk first, and make sure that the little bar is moving so that you can see that your microphone is picking up sound. If you don't have a microphone, oh, there we go. Hey, Emily Rose.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Yay, my Bluetooth microphone works.
Yay.
So for a really long time, my mom was really overweight, and she was on, I don't know, every diet imaginable. And we had our own garden, and she cooked like almost all of our food, but we were really poor, and I didn't know that until I grew up and moved away, and then became poor myself. And then I found out that I grew up poor, and I was like, oh, I never realized that not everyone went to the church to get their groceries. But she was really overweight. And then whenever I got overweight, she started, I guess, like poking fun, like not necessarily in a mean way, but she would do things like grab my stomach and be like, you need to lose weight, or have you been exercising, or what are you eating, or all these really intrusive questions and just painful experiences. And then she got her gastric bypass, and it got worse. And I had to tell her, like, I don't even know how many times to just not talk about my weight because it hurt. I don't know why she treats me like that.
Yeah, that I can hear the pain in your voice, Emily, and my first thought is my mom doesn't treat me around, it's not weight around, the issue that I get stuff from my mom, but just the other night I went to their house, and her uncle died, and he was the last of that generation. And I walked in the door, and she said something about that, and I said, yeah, I got the email from so-and-so. Anyway, she hadn't gotten the email, and she was really upset about it because she thought that she had been left out by the family. And she went off talking about that for quite a long time and talking about something else for quite a long time. And then I was talking about something completely unrelated, and she started getting very angry at me that I wasn't giving sympathy about her uncle when she had changed the subject. And what I realized was that she was really upset. She has her own issues. She has her own fears and her own stuff going on. And when people are stuck in their own stuff, they throw it out at other people. And it's really painful and it's really hard. And your mom probably may not even be aware that she's doing it and that it's hurting you so much. Sue Ann, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind is that, well, first of all, that when people are in pain, in their own pain, they project that pain on others. And so that could be where your mom is, you know, around the pain. But also what comes to mind for me is when that happens in my world, or when I see that happening in the world of my clients, we take that as an invitation to have a little boundary exercise. Like, so what is it that we need to do to take care of ourselves, you know? And for many of us, what's the language? You know, people just don't know what to say. They don't know how to respond, because we go back to being like 6, right? When we're confronted with a situation that feels scary, or that puts us back into a juvenile, you know, position, how we felt when we were 6 or 10 or 12. And so I often say to my clients, let's practice this. You know, and the words that we practice are, I'm struggling. Like, can we just remember those 2 words? Like, I'm struggling, you know, when I hear the words that you speak about my weight or my body, or I struggle when you grab, you know, my arm, so that we take it back to, this is how my response to you, and it doesn't become this conflict, but rather a communication. And sometimes, you know, there's an opening there, and sometimes there's just not. But at least we're exercising the boundary muscle. And I think that for us in life, especially around parents and loved ones, because I find I'm much more articulate with people I don't know, right, than people that I care deeply for, that I just need to keep it right here with what is my response, because often our realities are different. And I love this, the other exercise that I use with clients is, you know, to draw on a felt sense of when I was feeling powerful or strong or confident. And if I just close my eyes for a minute and think about some place in my world where I feel that way, and I draw on that energy in these situations, I stand differently. So that's really tricky, because there's a lot there, you know, at stake, you know, the relationship between you and your mother, your own self-concept. But I hear your struggle, and I know that your place is to take care of yourself. So if you can try that, you know, maybe that will shift the relationship with your mom.
Okay. Yeah. Because I moved away from my home state, which is where they still live, and feel a lot better now. Just my general self-confidence went, like, basically skyrocketed. But the couple times that I've seen them, you know, during family events, where we've all traveled to go meet in a central location, but never in Minnesota yet. I haven't gone back to Minnesota. But the couple of times, the first time was last year, and then the second time was this year that I saw her. And now I've invited her to come visit me here, and she's better since the second time I saw them this year, since I've moved away. But I'm still afraid, because there's just a general sense of fear, because it's been happening basically my whole life. Mm-hmm. And I just, you know, I want to be confident, and I don't want it to seem like I'm losing weight for her, because I'm not. I'm losing weight because I've changed my diet, because I realized that the foods I was eating were making me miserable, and I was finding that I was allergic to things and gaining weight because of them. And now that I've stopped eating them, I've lost weight. And I don't want her to think that I've lost weight for her.
I totally relate, Emily. It's a big challenge.
Yeah, I just say keep your side of the street clean. You keep knowing, that you are losing weight because you've chosen health. I say to people, we don't lose weight to get healthy. We get healthy so that we can release weight that isn't ours to carry. And unfortunately, sometimes the weight, it metaphorically is the weight of relationships. So keep doing what you're doing for you, and try as much as you can not to worry about things that you can't control. Thanks for sharing.
Okay. Thank you for the advice. I really appreciate it.
We have another question, Deirdre. Hi, Deirdre. She writes a question from the perspective of a mom. I hope you guys can hear me. There's so much noise out my window, and can you hear me?
Yeah, you're great.
Good. I have a question from the perspective of a mom. What is a healthy way to live with my daughter's poor food choices? Wow, that's a loaded one, isn't it? Aye. Sue Ann, do you have any thoughts to share on that?
Yes, I have lots to share on that, but I'd love to know how old her daughter is. Maybe she can type that in the box. Is Deidre still with us? Yep.
You're it's not on, Deirdre. Oh, there it is. Okay, now it's on.
Can you hear me? Yes? Okay.
It's kind of distorted, but I can hear you.
Okay. My daughter's 15.
This is a...
And so she doesn't, so my approach has been that, I try to get her to eat breakfast. She doesn't always eat breakfast. But I have kind of a vegan shake, like a protein powder, and she'll have some of that. And then we have a good dinner. I usually make dinner every night. And I can't control what she eats during the day, nor do I really want to. But she will, and since she's been very young, she'll eat like the highest calorie, sugary, she just loves that stuff. She loves chocolate stuff, and she loves wheat and cheese together, any combination of that. She just loves all that standard American diet stuff. So what I've done is I've really stripped the house of any kind of snacks or anything like that, because I know that she'll come home from school and she'll eat like chips and all that kind of stuff, and then not eat her dinner. But, when you were talking about the abundance, when you go back to the scarcity abundance conversation, so we really live with a scarcity of food, and not really behind it is so that I can stop her from, coming home and eating like 3,000 worth of calories of junk food.
Yeah, great questions. So the first thing I want to acknowledge is it's really hard for us as parents to watch our children make poor choices, especially if we have a consciousness around food, and the food intake, not only what we're eating, but how much we're eating. So to watch her come home at the hungry time, I call that for kids after school the hungry time, and indulge in things that she shouldn't be eating and then not eat the nourishing food is tricky. I also find that they don't have the consciousness when they're in their teens. They just want what tastes good. So the first that I hear you say is that you're giving her some sort of yummy, shake or whatever in the morning that she will drink. My a facet of my business, I don't know if you know this, is called Chocolate for Breakfast. So my business is conscious bites nutrition, but a facet of it is chocolate for breakfast. And the reason that I started that whole movement is because I felt as though we were being so rigid in our rules around food that we had lost the deliciousness of food. And I also wanted to give people permission to indulge in chocolate or in something tasty, but to find a way to up-level it, to elevate it. So my suggestion to you is, yes, keep the junk out of the house, but don't make it a forbidden food, because then when you get into that scarcity, she'll go out and overindulge in that food. So, for me, I say, okay, let's make that food, those foods, a treat for youngsters, but also maybe a vehicle for something more nourishing. So, for example, they like pretzels and they're dipping the pretzels in almond butter, at least we have something there besides a pretzel that has no nutritional value. But for me, too, it's like changing the inference. Like if I make a chocolate zucchini bread, and I know that everything in that bread is, and there's one on my website if you're interested in the recipe for this, but it's buckwheat flour, so there's no gluten in it. The moisture in it is sweet potato, mashed sweet potato, and shredded zucchini, and cacao powder, and some really high quality chocolate chips, and it's like eating this amazing decadent brownie. Well, you only need a little square of that. You're not going to eat the whole thing because it'd be way too much. So if I have enough of that in the house that it's not a forbidden food, but it's also made up of nourishing food, then I feel better that it's good, that I know we're not eating a brownie mix, right? And it's not the forbidden food anymore, so no one in my home is going to be looking for it, much like you talked about, Melissa, when you talked about this scarcity of when there were brownies in home, you better eat them because you weren't going to see them again, right? So I invite people to try and come from that abundant place of, I'm going to have this food in my home, but it's going to be high quality brownies, high quality foods that are treats and made from real food. The other thing that I've noticed with kids, and there was a great example that somebody I interviewed on one of my programs said once. His name was Mark David, and he's the founder of the Institute for the Psychology of Eating. He has a teenage son. And we asked him the same question because we wanted to know, what's your perspective? Here you are, a nutritional psychologist, and you've got a teenage son. How do you approach food in your home? And he shared the story. He said, well, he's always kept this conversation like, for example, if his son wants a Starbucks at 10 o'clock, Mark would say, well, okay, go ahead and order that. And then he'd let the kid drink the Starbucks, be up all night. And then he would casually say at breakfast, so tell me, how was that for you? How was your sleep last night? So that the kids are saying, oh, I don't really feel really good when I eat ice cream for snack and then can't eat dinner, but they have to in some way own it and come to that conclusion like we do, and we have to trust that they're going to, okay, they're not going to die from a Twinkie, or pretzels, but if we make the eating experience so tempting and so beautiful and we're enjoying the food on the table, even if they snacked out, right, and are not hungry when they see us enjoying something beautiful, they may be drawn in to that food. So I like to think of it as an invitation instead of a requirement. And again, that goes back to me. What can I do around my food that looks more inviting than trying to control someone else's food? And for me, too, my husband is a great example. I don't have a teenager at home, but my husband, we've been married 12 years now. When I married him, his plate, I kid you not, was a piece of chicken, a pile of mashed potatoes, and a pile of cottage cheese. Not a vegetable in this man's diet. And I wasn't about to change him. He was in his 40s when we married. We were, a late marriage. So I just kept making my amazing salads and salmon or whatever it was, and started a garden. And, I would say it's been a process, but he kept looking at my plate. And now, really we are eating pretty much the same thing. It used to be that he still had his plate and I had my plate, but more and more, he just saw the amazing food on my plate and he couldn't stay away from it any longer. He's cheese nips and potato chips, though.
My sweetie was avoided greens like the plague also until I was always making salads. And I eat tons of vegetables all the time. And I remember walking by a restaurant in my hometown. It's a salad place. And I was like, hey, you want to go here? This is when we were dating. And he was like, And maybe 6 months later, he was taking me there because he'd gotten so he'd gotten to love salads so much and discover that they can be so delicious and yummy and yum, and he just needed to experience a little bit. And now he still will, I'll eat his greens. When we go out to a restaurant, he won't eat the greens, but everything I make at home, I just bring greens into everything. So anyway, for what it's worth.
Is that helpful, Deidre? Do you have any other questions around that?
It is, and certainly with dinners, I've tailored them around to things that she, I've drawn her in with things that she likes. And so it's not so much, so that has worked at dinner time. It's more the mother, as people have been talking about, the mother-daughter relationship is so braided with, around food. It's huge, and it becomes, and that's food can have such lasting repercussions for people.
I'm getting a lot of noise, but I can't hear the voice. How about you, Melissa? Were you able to hear what she was saying?
No, that whole last section, Deirdre, was very distorted. We couldn't hear you.
I said that the whole mother-daughter relationship around food, it can be such a minefield, and that it's a case of where do you pick your battles? I mean, with a 15-year-old, there's going to be battles, and do you want to make it around food? Can you hear them? Can you hear now?
Yes.
Yeah. It's just a case of as a mother in this part of the relationship, and then seeing her, she's maybe about 20 pounds overweight at this point. Just wanting to be, feeling like I'm walking on eggshells, around the whole thing, because it can have lasting, as other people have been talking about, it can have lasting repercussions through someone's whole life about how they take on a daily practice of nourishing themselves.
And particularly concerning for you, knowing that she is overweight, and that as she carries that weight and it continues to grow, that she'll be at risk, at health risk. So my question too, is she conscious of her weight in a way that it matters to her?
I think she is. But I think so. I think what I'm going to do this year is she hates exercise. That's just been that's like pulling hen's teeth trying to get her to exercise. So I think I'm going to sign this up for Aquafit. We were doing some of that at a camp. And then maybe start having some of these conversations as we go to the classes over the next number of months.
Yeah, I think that just being there for her, as opposed to trying to manage this, is probably exactly the portal that she needs. Is knowing that you're there, but you're not trying to manage it, because when she comes to you for help around this, then there'll be an opening. Right now, the mother-daughter relationship, this is like this for all mothers and daughters everywhere, right? It's you said it exactly earlier, we have to pick our battles. And so I would just say, keep providing beautiful food and plenty of fruits and vegetables, and be a model for that, and have some trust that there will be a point where she grows into her weight. When she becomes conscious enough that the foods that she's eating are not making her feel good, and she feels better when she has a green smoothie for breakfast instead of a Pop-Tart or whatever kids grab, from the machines at school. Just keep providing the best food you can, and don't make an issue out of it. And I think that she'll be able to lean into it much more readily.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to suggest both for Emily, who just wrote in the text chat, that exercise in and of itself is a boring thing to do. I know for myself, she writes, I need something to activate my brain. It needs purpose. And I'm just posting in the text chat a book that I have been reading that has really changed my life. It's called Spark, the new science, the revolutionary new science of exercise and the brain. And I don't know if it will be helpful for your daughter, Deirdre, but it actually got me to exercise. And I am a physical person. There are lots of physical things that I really love to do, like dance and yoga and walking, but I've not been doing anything aerobic for years. And this is the book that got me on the exercise bike every single morning for the past 2.5 weeks so far. And it's all about how exercise literally grows our brains, changes our brains, increases our ability to learn, helps with addictions, helps prevent what's the word? The word dementia. That's the word that I'm not able to access. It helps prevent dementia, helps with depression. It's quite. It turns out that the Greeks were right.
Just lost your voice, Melissa.
Oh, can you hear me now?
No.
Okay. So this book is, I think, 2008 maybe, and it's all the science, neuroscience of the exercise in the brain, and I highly recommend it. We are very close to the top of the hour, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. And Sue Ann, I wanted to get to your story of how you got from Conscious Bites to chocolate for breakfast, which you mentioned just briefly. But since we only have a few minutes, I would love to hear more about this program that you have coming up. It just sounds so wonderful, your Well-Nourished Woman program. Would you share with us some about that?
I have two websites. One is consciousbitesnutrition.com, and that's conscious with an S and bites with an S. People always have a hard time finding that one. And the other one is chocolateforbreakfast.com. And the program that I'm going to be launching in mid-September is called the Well-Nourished Woman, and the first half of that program will be focused on the plate, right, and just the whole eating experience and how to tackle, the kitchen in a way that we can make elegantly easy meals that are absolutely luscious, and the experience of food around that. And that will also be imbued with my Conscious Bites concepts, which I teach in all my programs and my individual work. And then the second half of the program is going to be, a study of our creative lives. It's in the first part, artful eating, and the second half, artful living, and how we can embody, this place of really listening to the creative voice inside and shifting that focus from I want to have the perfect body, the perfect weight, to I want to have a well-nourished life, a well-rounded life. And I'll have some great guest speakers. I know Jennifer Loudon will be on the call with one of the calls with me. You'll be on one of the calls with me, Melissa, another really amazing woman by the name of Kathleen Prophet, who is well-versed in depth psychology and the embodied arts, will be on one of the calls. So that'll be just a really rich discussion and conversation of creativity. And in that space and time, we will also embark on some creative project, whether that means just taking pictures of our food or writing and unraveling our food story or dabbling in paint or poetry. We're going to do a lot of play. And that is a 3-month program, and I have a much shorter program on the chocolate for breakfast end that is just the kitchen experience. So some people will come on just for that 6 weeks to do the Clueless in the Kitchen program, and then others will sign up for the whole program. And very quickly we went from Conscious Bites Nutrition to Chocolate for Breakfast to do this, to lighten up the conversation and really examine what it means to have a luscious relationship with food. And you may want to check out the Luscious Legacy Project on that website, because that's where I interview women around their struggles around food and body image and with their daughters, right? So you can see some models for how people work with that. And it's nice to see other people's stories. We learn through people's stories, right? Which takes us full circle, Melissa. So yeah, check out both of those sites.
What a beautiful way to wrap it up. Sue Ann, it's just been such a pleasure to have you. Your program just looks so amazing, and again, there's just so many parallels that you and I share. So I just feel such a resonance with you. This has been such a treat to get to hang out with you guys for this hour. I will post all of Sue Ann's contact info when I get this recording up, and I'll send an email out when it's done. Keep the conversation going, and thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and maybe I will see you at the next hangout. Go get creating. Mwah. Bye.
Hi, Melissa.